A man wrote a letter to the philosopher Kwame Anthony Appiah asking for some advice. Here's his letter. Dear Sir, my grandchildren love playing Monopoly. The board game has become a great way for me to interact with them, and also a great way for them to see capitalism in all its imperfect glory. The problem: one of the cards a player may draw when landing on community chest is, quote, bank error in your favor, collect $200. I removed that card from the set because it taught the wrong lesson. The proper thing to do when there is a bank error in your favor is to report it and return the money. My grandchildren discovered the deletion and believe I'm being silly and old-fashioned. After all, it's just a game, they say. I stand by my belief that the card should not be in the game. We learn all kinds of lessons from gameplay, and ethical decision-making should not be dismissed so easily. How tightly should play reinforce ethical behavior? Is a game a place where you can and should live in a different ethical world? Sincerely, Grandpa. To which the philosopher Appiah replies, Dear Grandpa, quote, I wonder whether your moral focus here is a tad narrow. We're talking about a board game called Monopoly. Players succeed by dominating market segments and extracting ruinous rents after they build on boardwalk without so much as a wetlands permit, let alone an environmental impact review. It's a world where incarceration is utterly normalized and rapacity is rewarded. And what troubles your conscience is the prospect that the bank gets shortchanged. That's not to single out this particular board game. In chess, white enjoys inherent advantage by moving first. Battleship encourages the sinking of ships without the slightest effort at diplomacy. Risk is basically a primer on imperialism, urging players to conquer continents and subjugate foes. Clue trivializes violent homicide. In the library with a candlestick, right? Sorry sanitizes revenge, and well, the list goes on. But what's the point? All this board game barbarity leaves our souls unscorched. Games indeed exist within their own imaginative space, where competitors engage in chilly strategy and conflict without carrying its lessons into real-life morality. Removing this random cash injection card will only make it a bit harder for trailing players to catch up. So put it back. You can even use it as a moment for conversation and ask your young reprobates what they'd actually do in that situation. Just don't lose sight of the bigger picture here. If your grandkids are still willing to play with a sermonizing card snatcher, they must really love you. Roll the dice, I say. You've already won. The pretend personality of the player in the board game Monopoly, or any of these other ones that have been mentioned, is founded upon an imaginary reality that the game creates. To play the game right, you play by its rules, and implied in the rules is the method of winning the game that may require you to assume a role that also depends on the roll of the dice. To win at Monopoly, you must assume the role of unapologetically greedy capitalist, and to recognize that each of the other players is pretending that as well. When the game ends, you can return to your non-game identity. Hopefully, it's not a greedy landlord. Addressing the question of our self-identity is not simple. There are a variety of roles that we play and live by and labels that have been given to us or we might self-impose. One person could be a variety of labels and roles. For example, here's an imaginary person. Hispanic, college-educated, childless, veteran, professional, Unitarian millennial using she, her pronouns. Covers a lot of territory. Making a list of roles and labels that we have held over a lifetime would be a lengthy list. Evidence of two important truths. One, how diverse we really are. Two, how much we have changed. We are serial role players, which informs my topic this morning, genuine pretending. Genuine pretending is a spiritual practice that cultivates an awareness of the limits of our ever-changing roles. That our lives are marked by constant change can be confusing and stressful. The change in roles can cause anxiety. Genuine pretending recognizes that social roles and identifying labels, while descriptive, are also unsubstantial and inessential. Philosopher Herbert Dreyfus says, the roles we enact are different from real understanding, which is, as he says here, wisdom and knowledge. Wisdom and knowledge is embodied, situated, and historically contingent. Lao Tzu suggests living with our roles like a mirror that reflects the situation without becoming it. He suggests resisting becoming identified with everything that happens to you, resisting the temptation of claiming full ownership over all the roles and labels. New roles and labels arrive like packages from Amazon. Deirdre and I have a game. It shows up, and we look at it. We go, what is this? Did you order this? What's in this? And we try to figure out what's in it. Did I order this? Sometimes roles fade away or disappear abruptly, but the feelings remain, having become habits that have outlasted their usefulness. Genuine pretending is a spiritual practice of living in society with its roles without over-internalizing them, over-identifying with any of them. Unlike Monopoly or Dungeons and Dragons, life is not a role-playing game. Even the idea that we have roles is a metaphor. Roles are merely labels of convenience. The spiritual practice of genuine pretending is a practice that empties the identification of the self with all our diverse roles and labels, empties them of their power by recognizing that they are only metaphors or socially convenient constructions. We are not our metaphors. That our social roles are creative construction doesn't make them phony or us insincere. The genuine pretender fulfills the role without identifying completely with the role. Enjoy playing with your grandchildren? That's you enjoying it, not your role. The Tao Te Ching speaks of knowing others as being wise and of knowing oneself as being enlightened. Genuine pretending is a spiritual practice that recognizes that the self is not identical with our feelings. Feelings change. They come and they go. That they happened does not mean that they have to continue to define us. They are not who we are all the time. They are related to our embodiment, our body feels, but they do not have to define who we are. Feelings are contingent and temporary and are subject to the power of self-knowledge. This is true even in those suffering from PTSD, though addressing those feelings is more complicated. This awareness and origins and nature of feelings gives one a measure of control over them rather than vice versa. One can develop the skill to live as if not everything that happens has to be felt, has to be decided upon, or that everything requires us to have an opinion about it. One can resist becoming identified with everything that happens to you. One can ignore the temptation of claiming any ownership over whatever one is feeling or doing or experiencing. Both roles and feelings can become habits that have long outlasted their authenticity and usefulness. Bluebird, sitting with her friend Owl, sitting on the post one day, and Crow drops by. Thunk. Bluebird decided it would be much better if Crow could sing a song rather than just cawing all the time. Don't you know any different songs, Bluebird? So she tried to teach Crow how to carry a tune. But Crow just ignored Bluebird's attempts to teach, which made her feeling impatient and frustrated. You're a bird. Owl said to Bluebird, "You can't make Crow other than he is. He won't be different just because you want him to be. Just appreciate Crow for what he already is. Then you'll feel happy." Genuine pretending is attending to our roles as best we can without overly identifying with them. To cultivate enough self-knowledge in order to practice selflessness. Learn about yourself. Learn how to be selfless. There's probably have been occasions when our best self has been selfless. Taoist selflessness does not mean that there is no self, as in Buddhism, according to which there is no entity like that to begin with. You peel the onion, you keep peeling it, and it's just layers. There is no center to the onion. The selfless person in Taoism retains human attributes. We are still a body. We live in an environment with consciousness and memory. So the goal of practicing selflessness in genuine pretending does not mean we totally lose the self, like in nirvana or absorbed into Brahman. We accept that we live in a world that is not of our making and over which we have little power. One might imagine the practice like a vaccine that immunizes us from psychic pain and emotional afflictions caused by over-identification with the roles that come and go. Some labels are of recent invention. Gay, or my favorite, retired. One of the most influential metaphors of the 20th century is an invention by Sigmund Freud of the ego, a word that describes a cluster of various thoughts and feelings. It is a descriptive metaphor. It's so ubiquitous in our culture that we would be challenged to excise it from our vocabulary. Can we take it out? It's just a recent invention. Author Albert C. Brooks believes there is such a thing as an ego, and he suggests in his essay, The Bliss of a Quieter Ego, that there are ways to quiet the ego that also can be seen in the practice of genuine pretending. Pretend there is really a thing called an ego, and then silence it. Brooks says, first ask, quote, "What do others need that only I can provide?" End quote. Brooks writes that this question empowers me to do what is uniquely under my control, and giving that to the people who need me most, who depend on me. Distinguishing what is under my control and what is not is central to the practice of genuine pretending. Part 2, Brooks says, whatever the roles and labels, I focus on caring generously, selflessly. I am mindful of performing these tasks to the best of my ability. I attend to what I can do, and this is really important. And this next part means that I give less attention to all that I cannot control. Can't control it, it gets a 2. It gets a 3. Quieting the ego's voice of disappointment when realizing the limits of control is a good part of this practice. Secondly, Brooks says, practice making this affirmation, quote, I am not my emotions. Employing this declaration of division, self, emotions, cultivates a detached self-awareness. Emotions are information, not a guide to how I should evaluate my life or choose to act. When I wake up feeling blue, I am not a sad person, he says, but rather someone who feels a certain way when you wake up that I'm going to label sad. Maybe the feeling comes from too little sleep, not enough protein, or arising in the morning to thoughts, for example, of disappointment and desire. Blue is a description of feelings and not a role you have to play. Not being your emotions means leaving this feeling of blue in the bed. Stoic philosopher Vil van Truren noted that, Marcus Aurelius said, the things you think about determine the quality of your mind. Your soul takes on the color of your thoughts. End quote. Van Truren says that Marcus was reminding himself that we have to train our minds to examine all of our impulses and initial reactions, those first feelings. The way we think and define the world around us is a habit. And we can't change our habits without a real effort, which is why this is a spiritual practice. It takes time. Every situation, no matter how bad it seems, contains some opportunity for you to become a better person, he says. So the next time you notice a negative thought in your head, remember that you really do have the power to change the color of your impressions. Not by fooling yourself, but by deciding you're going to make the best of everything that life puts in your path. End quote. Genuine pretending's practice of selflessness is transcending our attachment to roles and labels and even feelings. Genuine pretending is a source of mental health and well-being that empowers us to change the color of our impressions. It is a practice that is empowering because it is knowledge that feelings are fleeting. Roles change, as does the world in which they rise and fall. Accepting the inevitability of change and a world indifferent to our desires is central to this spiritual practice. The world really doesn't care what we expect from it. Cultivating the authentic self doesn't come from what the world gives you, but how you respond to it without even identifying with your responses. Genuine pretending cultivates a practice of living our lives beyond the roles and labels, even while remaining aware of them. Thank you.